Hello, guys. David Vos here. Oh, it's a beautiful day. We're getting a little sunshine this morning, but every day these clouds roll in afternoon and so forth. It starts raining, and we've been having flash floods and just so much rain. It's so green. It's so beautiful. Hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. Today, I want to talk to you about diet again, but I really want to explore the depths of diet and in its reality and not just in this um, fantasy realm that so many people are in, where not only are they trying to live a life that isn't coherent with the reality that where they're living. I mean, there are people that are vegetarians that are living in the city, and all they're eating is lettuce and bread, and they think they're vegetarians and they're healthy. That's not healthy, friends. You have to have good health. That's important to the Lord. Not just that you eat right, but that you're healthy, because it affects your mind and your heart. So there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. And I want to get right into it because I want to show you. I'm going to start right off with the Apostle Paul and his words in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, where he talks about eating meat. Let's really take a little look at what he's actually saying there, friends. So this is the first verse that Paul uses. And you notice in chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians, he's really talking about. First verse starts off, he's addressing things offered unto idols. So now this is an example of how the Bible has to be understood very, very carefully. Because you could go back and forth between several different opinions here, and it would seem very likely that you were right until you thought about it from another angle. So, first angle is, well, this has nothing to do with eating meat. This is only to do with eating things offered to idols. And you say, well, what is things offered to idols? Why would the Apostle Paul have to tell people not to eat meat and sacrifice it to some foreign devil? Obviously, Christians knew that they weren't supposed to sacrifice animals to deity. The New Testament teaches that, and the Old Testament teaches, that our Heavenly Father does not want us to sacrifice animals to atone for your sin or to be redeemed from sin. That it means nothing. Isaiah 66 and various places in the Old Testament tells us, Amos chapter 5, that we should not sacrifice animals to deities or any deity. Any deity wants that. It's a false deity. So why is he even talking about this? Well, because they lived in town and in the city or in the people's area, there were people that when they ate meat, it was because they were offering some of it to the Lord. Like if you were a Jew, eating meat was a way of salvation. Now, I think originally it meant, we have all these lenses we put on when we look at things. Originally, I don't think somebody came along and said, listen, this is how we're going to worship God. We're going to kill animals. This is great. We'll just kill them and that'll make God love us. Huh? No. But, so, what is this murdering of animals and sacrificing them to the Lord? Well, we go back to Genesis chapter 1. And Adam and Eve supposedly sinned, but now we find out that they didn't sin. They fell, they went down into the mortal realm, a temporary realm. They left their bright outer white robes, their bodies of light, where they were naked but not ashamed. They had no shame, no guilt. But they were naked. They didn't have immortality, because that's an interesting thing. Did we always have immortality? Well, yes, in a sense, because we were with the Lord forever. From the founding of the world, we clapped our hands for joy. The morning stars clapped their hand for joy. The foundations of the earth. And he says, where were you, Job? Well, obviously Job was there, or else why is the Lord asking him, where was he? And the whole point of it is that there are more than one stars that are in the morning. And why are they in the morning? Because they rise up on the horizon at dawn after having gone through the dark night. So we all had to go down into the dark night of the soul. We all had to learn by the things in which we suffered. That's a plan of salvation. We all had to be punished, disciplined, because the ones that the Lord loves, he disciplines. And like children, we have to be disciplined. So we learn by the things that we suffer. And Jesus partook of flesh and blood, as did his brethren. Right? Why? What's the point of partaking of flesh and blood? In other words, they didn't have flesh and blood, Adam and Eve, but they partook of flesh and blood. Who was the first one to partake of flesh and blood? Well, Jesus partook of flesh and blood, as did his brethren. He was the firstborn among many brethren. Well, if Adam and Eve were the first ones to partake of flesh, no longer be naked, then the firstborn of the brethren was Jesus, and that was Abel. But, we're going to steer away from looking into that part of it right here. But the part I want you to see is that Jesus partook of flesh and blood. And it was for a reason, right? He learned by the things in which he suffered. And we know that he was the firstborn among many brethren. Now, we know also that we must be born from above, right? A man can't be born again from his mother's womb, Nicodemus says. But Jesus said, no, but that which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. And we all must be born again from above, of spirit. We've all been born of flesh. Now we got to be born of spirit. There's a plan here. You see, the plan of salvation, that we go through a classroom, because the law, which is what? Eating meat, murdering, killing one another, judgment, vengeance, hate. Well, the law was a schoolmaster that led us to Christ. I would not have known sin had the law not say, thou shalt not sin. So there is a reason we're here, and all of this is happening. And if you look at the world today, or the world that we've been in for the last several in this world, as we know it, there is death. I'll tell you the story of my little kittens. And then I want to get back to this. My little kittens are born just as innocent and as pure as the day is long. I love those little kittens so deeply. I love my chicken. I love my dogs. They are so pure and innocent. But they have no idea of what sin is. They don't think about sin. They don't contemplate sin. They only live by the grace of deity. Whatever the Lord provided for them, that's what they do. And the Lord does not hold them accountable and say it's their fault. They were born into the world. They are what they are. I am what I am. I'm Popeye de Sailor Man, you see. So, cats and dogs are not sinners, but they murder each other and they eat each other. And it isn't some flaw in nature. If you live on a farm, you realize that the mice will come in, they give you disease, they poop in your food, they're messing around in your home. If you got babies, toddlers running around, you cannot have mice in your home. They could cause serious disease. Dropping their feces in your food, getting into the boxes in your cupboards, into the running around, maybe dropping little droppings that your child, your toddler could get a hold, put it in his mouth. And a lot of animals like snakes and spiders, we have to murder them. Mosquitoes, because if you don't believe they cause death or can cause it, just go outside around here and find you a big old rattlesnake and let him bite you. Well, I wouldn't recommend it because you might have to go to a hospital. And they could kill you. And in fact, a big snake, certain kinds of snakes, will kill you dead. Maybe not. Maybe you'll just have to cut your arm off, right? To get rid of the infection or something. But and you could maybe survive. But the point is that they're deadly. If you're out in the woods and you come across a cougar, a mountain lion, or if you're in Africa and you run across a lion or a tiger, or here in America, you're in the Canadian wilderness and you run across a big grizzly or a polar bear, well, I guarantee you better get out of there. You better not hang around because you don't know. It might be that season where the bears aren't very happy. Maybe mama's got her cubs, or maybe they're just hungry. They've been known to kill people. You have seen cougars and mountain lions attacking humans, but listen, okay, maybe they don't normally do that, but you know what they do? And well, they do that. They do that. But what they normally do, what a cougar does, is take down a deer and eat it, or rabbits, or birds, or whatever they can get, or fish. They will kill animals indiscriminately and murder them. And when I'm watching my little kittens grow, I notice several things. They're born with sharp teeth, with two little front, I don't know what you call them, incisors or whatever, but, well, incisor, those are the flat front teeth. But the two sharp teeth, I guess they're called canine. I guess that's where we get the word canine. They eat meat. They got those two front teeth. But they're sharp as razors. And even as a kitten, they can bite you and go right through the flesh and hit the bone. And then they can rip the flesh right off the animal. They're born with the ability, and that's what it's for. Their little claws are so sharp and curled around so that they can, and they can extend or contract those claws. So when they're walking around, they're contracted. They are naturally not sticking out very far. They probably wouldn't cause you too much harm. When they go to swipe at you, if they're trying to hurt you, they will extend their claws and they become sharp razors and they can just cut you. Now imagine the same thing with a big lion or a tiger. If they were to make a swipe with their hand, they would just slice you right in half. Why? Why do they have these fierce abilities? Because they were created to murder. Now, they're not evil. They're doing a job. In this world that we live in, it's a schoolmaster that leads to Christ. In this world, there is death. In this world, there is vengeance. In this world, there is trouble. Because you got to get over the trouble. You got to overcome the world. And so, while it may be healthy to live in this world, if you're going to live healthy, if you're going to be strong, if that cat's going to go out and survive, he's got to have meat. My little mother cat is the best mama I've ever seen. I love her so much. She had 7 kittens. We got another one, so she's got 8 kittens. I found the other one coming home along the road, a black one. And these cats are mostly orange, though there's one gray one. But she has, from the day that they could, they had their eyes open, they were trying to walk around, she would go out every day, catch a mouse or a squirrel or a lizard, and bring it in. Thank goodness she didn't find any snakes. She would bring it in half alive and give it to the kittens, and they would learn. She was teaching them. And I think also she was giving them the meat because they needed to grow. When they're little kittens, they need the meat to build strong bones and bodies. It is a fact that meat is healthy for the body. In this carnal world that we live in, eating meat is the way nature makes it run smoothly. The cats are born to go into the field and kill the mice because the mice aren't. You see, everything's designed in this world. This is how you know it's created, because everything in this world is designed for humans, not for cats. I mean, yeah, cats have a design so they can kill, but why? Because humans need mice and predators gone. Why do dogs seem to have an insatiable need to herd sheep? When they see deer, they want to go run barking and nipping at their heels. They want to herd them. Dogs are constantly, they're up all night barking. They're up all night in the woods barking. And at first, I didn't like it. I would try to tell my dogs to be quiet, and I would try to keep them inside, and I didn't like them barking. But now that I've got my ducks and chickens in my farm, I realize how imperative it is for my dogs to be outside barking all night long. And anytime they hear some predator or anything, they run over there and they run it off. They are watchdogs. That's their purpose. So what is the purpose for bugs? Well, I found a little story that I wanted to tell you here. And it concerns something that I thought of about a week or so ago. And I looked it up on AI because, I'd probably have looked it up before, but it's like sometimes you need to put these things together better. It's like we're looking at a Rubik's Cube and we got one or two sides done, but the other two sides aren't, and we think we're done. But, we constantly reevaluating everything because we got to make it all make sense. And so I was thinking about how I started hearing frogs and, I don't know, crickets and all kinds of weird animals that I'd never heard around here. I've only heard them a couple of times. Usually in the summer, after a heavy rain, we get these puddles. Little ponds show up in the desert. And you'll be walking along and you start hearing frogs. Now, obviously, for 11 months out of the year, probably there aren't any puddles in that area. And there were no frogs in the area. And all of a sudden, it rains. So we could say pretty accurately that there were no frogs there for about 11 months at least. And sometimes in droughts, there aren't going to be any frogs in the area for several years. But once a flood comes or a storm that wets the ground and makes these little ponds, it's a heavy enough rain that it soaks the ground deep down 3-4 feet. All of a sudden, next morning you hear frogs. And, I wasn't sure if I'd ever been told or heard why that happens. So I looked it up on AI, and it turns out, actually my cat just brought in, I don't know if it's a lizard or a squirrel. It's a good size lizard. If it's a lizard, it might be a squirrel. And that's the little gray one. And she's growling over there in the corner. You might hear her. And they just do this now every day. Each and every one of the kittens that go out in the garden. And they don't bother the garden. They're the fleetest-footed animals. Fleet-footed. That's how you say it. They jump into the garden and they don't bother the tomatoes or the squash or the pumpkins or the watermelons or whatever's growing out there. They're not bothering anything. Even though they play and run, and they might roll over something and but they're light on their feet. But they go through and they will get gophers and lizards, and they'll go all around the property and come back with squirrels. And I don't even know how they get squirrels. because the squirrels are usually up in the trees. But so back to the frogs. In a desert, there are no bugs for months if it's dry. There are no bugs at all. There are no snakes in the winter. They only come out in the summer. And there's very few of them around here. And we have rattlesnakes in this area, but I think that's the only kind of snake we have. And I've only seen 3 or 4 of them since I've been here. And that's including the ones I see along the road that somebody ran over. I've only seen 3 or 4. So we have very few snakes, but we do have some here and there. But anyway, which is another thing I learned about snakes. They stay underground for most of the year and only come out for a month or 2 during the summer. And they get their water, because I had wondered about that. Where do they get water if it's in a desert? Most of all of the water that a snake gets, it's from eating mice and stuff. It's the blood. And some of the snakes have a little trick they use where when it rains, they'll flatten their bodies out like a little trough, and the water will bead up on the back of their spine, and they can twist their neck around and drink the water off their own backs. And this is a little trick that some of them use. And I asked also AI about snakes in regard to how do they make holes. Well, they don't. They simply commandeer a mouse hole or gopher hole or whatever animals make holes, probably even rabbit holes. And that's why most rabbits and squirrels have back doors. The problem is the back door saves the mother and maybe the father and stuff, but the little ones don't get out because they're infants and the snakes come in and eat them. So it's a cruel world. And then they commandeer their little house and they live in it. But I think a lot of snakes just go through the cracks and holes and get back inside of cliffs and caves. But the frogs, how do frogs suddenly appear croaking in the desert the next day after a rainfall? Believe it or not, frogs bury themselves in the dirt and live in a coma, or they don't even hardly breathe, like in a cocoon, under the ground, up to like 3 feet under the ground. And they can live there for, they said, some of them 2 or 3 years. Some of them have been known to do this for 10 or 15 years underground. And think about it. If they spend their entire life in a coma and maybe come up 1 month out of the year, every other year, they spend almost all of their life hibernating and waiting to come up for just a short little period to have polywogs and make as many frogs as they can to go down, bury themselves to do this process again, to come back up when it rains. They don't live then for themselves. The purpose of frogs is for something else. Their purpose is not to live to be happy. They're not living a fulfilled life of happiness. Their life is only so that there will be food for other little varmints that will be food for other varmints. Same with a lot of these bugs. Their only purpose is food. So the frogs live most of their life buried under the earth. It's all dry and they're just basically in a coma. And as soon as it rains and wets the soil where they can move around, and the vibrations of the rainfall wakes them up. And usually every year when it rains, they come out and they'll start croaking and having children immediately. They make polywogs. And then all those little frogs, most of them die. But what was the point of having these frogs? And the same thing goes for mosquitoes and bugs. They only come out when it's wet usually. Certain bugs do that. They'll go into cocoons, they'll hibernate. So what is the point of all of this? Because when life begins, when water comes down, that's when life begins. And now, for there to be larger animals in an area, you've got to start. This is almost like evolution, but here's where evolution is found out. It's an evolution that goes on continuously. Anywhere you go in the world, in order to have animals, you've got to have food for the animals. You have to have mice to have cats and dogs to live. You got to have rabbits. That's what they eat. And in order to have mice, because they eat other things like bugs and plants. So when it rains, the plants grow. That gives food for the little animals. The bugs pollinate and go around to the plants. But the bugs have got to come out of nowhere, just like seeds that lay dormant and then it rains and then they sprout. The same thing goes for animals. They lay in the dirt like seeds and they survive. I wonder if a seed isn't a living thing, even though it's apparently dead in a shell, but inside it's still alive, hibernating, just like animals. Plants do the same thing. And then, boom, spring comes and they all come to life. Now, the frog cannot survive without mosquitoes and bugs. You wonder what they're for. Well, the little bugs are to feed the smaller animals. The smaller animals feed the bigger animals. It is a process that is nature and you cannot get around it. So, take note of the fact that we live in this world that is cursed. Yahweh said, "Cursed be the ground for thy sake, Adam. It will not produce for thee, but thorns and thistles." And then Jesus comes along and says, you don't get food from thorns or thistles. So what is he saying? The food that we're getting in this world, which is a cursed world that Yahweh cursed, the environment, the life, the way we live, you cannot get food from these cursed plants. And therefore, we are living in a classroom of death. As humans, we have to understand it, not just become the animal and participate in it like as if it's our nature. As humans, we realize that it's only a temporary nature and that we're growing and learning from it, and that the law was a schoolmaster that led us to Christ, that we're supposed to rise above this world. And many of the apostles and early Christians and mystics for thousands of years have seen all of this, and it's led them to be vegetarians. We're told that James the Just was vegetarian, ate seeds and nuts, and that's about it. We don't know about all the apostles, but many of them, we know early Christians were vegetarians. Pythagoras was. But there are a lot of questions. One, what if all you had to eat was meat? You had a family and children. Would you then allow your family to eat meat if you were starving? Well, prophets have answered this question. And in fact, for most people in this world, for those who have faith, for those who have wisdom, we can work all these problems out. We can understand that there is a world of death. And we understand also that when we kill an animal, we're doing it by giving thanks. The Bible says all these foods become clean. So we give thanks. And what does that mean? As long as we say thank you, we can murder? No, it means that as long as we understand the process. You see, it's kind of like the difference between just murdering somebody in violence and murdering somebody out of self-defense. But this is a little different. This is a situation where we as humans realize that we're in a world where these animals aren't yet capable of grasping all the things that humans are able to grasp, the concepts of love and even thinking about tomorrow and planning a future. And we know that they are made to reincarnate in this classroom. that their only purpose, many of them, like bugs, are only alive for a couple days. That's all that their purpose is to feed the other animals. And in fact, they're poison, and they have to be killed immediately, as quick as possibly, because the mosquitoes and the bugs and the ticks and everything will hurt your children. So that's their purpose. And then for mice, their purpose is to be born, live a few days, a week or two, and then become food for the cats. And the cats have claws, and they're born with them, and they're vicious. And the mother trains them to hunt. This is the world. And if you understand it, then you can say, okay, I'm not killing because I want to eat meat. I'd rather eat vegetables. But when we're starving and we can't tame the world, because remember, we're going to live in a paradise where the wolf will lie down with the lamb eventually. We've got to tame the world. But until we can, and we have an environment where we can live in peace and have a good garden and grow proper nutrients and make the world a paradise again and remove the curse, which is what? The law. And the law is not removed. We're still living in a wicked world. So we have to ask ourselves, what should we do? And we can turn to the apostles and prophets because they have the Holy Spirit, and they will teach us what we ought to do. So Paul says, now as touching things offered unto idols. We know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. And if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know it. But if a man love deity, the same is known of him. As concerning, therefore, the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other deity but one. For though there be that are called deities, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be deities many and lords many. But as to us there is but one deity, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. Howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge. For some with conscience of the idol, unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto idols. And their conscience, being weak, is defiled. Now we understand what the word weak is in Paul's writings when he says that some are weak and sick among you. Well, it may be that eating vegetables alone made them sick, but he does use this word weak as in the conscience, a lack of faith and weak in your faith. So he says, but meat commendeth us not to deity. For neither if we eat are we better, neither if we eat not are we worse. Now, notice what Paul says here very blatantly. It doesn't make you better or worse if you ate meat. For any reason. He doesn't say, only in the case of idols. Well, if we're not supposed to eat meat just because it's sacrificed to idols, then even there, you could eat meat if it's not sacrificed to an idol. But some people went to the market in those days, and a lot of the meat that was in the market had been already, part of that animal had already been sacrificed to some deity. And so Christians said, well, it was meat sacrificed to an idol, we can't eat it. They didn't care about eating meat. Many of the Christians ate meat, but they wouldn't eat it because it had something to do with idol worship. So here he's saying, it doesn't matter if we eat meat, we're not better or worse if we do. So you could still, like I said before, you have to take these verses one way and then look at them from another angle and another angle. So if you're imagining that all he's talking about is idol worship and things sacrificed to idols, because remember, that's something that was important. Because even the apostles in Acts chapter 15, after they said, we're not under the law, but we think you should not eat things sacrificed to idols. In other words, if you did eat meat, we certainly wouldn't sacrifice the animal to a deity. So they made certain we know that. But now Paul is telling us if we don't know whether the meat was sacrificed to an idol, we don't have to worry about it. We're just talking about intentionally eating meat that we know was sacrificed to idols, in that case, we only don't do it because somebody might be looking and watching us and it might weaken their faith. Isn't this interesting? So here he's just talking about things sacrificed to some deity. We don't know for sure if he's even talking about eating meat. But he does, by this verse, say that we can eat meat. Right? I mean, it's not the point of what he's saying. He's talking about things sacrificed to idols. But in the point that he makes, he reveals that some people eat meat. Right? And so he goes on to say, take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to them that are weak. Weak in faith, you see, not weak in body. For if any man seeth thee which hath knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? In other words, they might think that because you're doing it, because you have a strong faith and you know that you don't believe in idols, but they might see it and think, oh, we should sacrifice meat to idols or something. You know, I don't know. But this is Paul's argument. And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. So we would perish if we were to sacrifice animals to deities. If we were to do any of that, if we were to sacrifice an animal unto some deity, that is so wrong, we would perish for our sin. So Paul's trying to say, so then 12, but when ye sin so against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, ye sin against Christ. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. Now, this is another interesting little verse, because he says we should not offend our brother. And if something was to offend our brother, we shouldn't do it. And if it's okay to eat meat, maybe it's even necessary for the human body to live, to get enough nutrition in circumstances where you can't get vegetables. Remember, there's a curse on this earth. There's thorns and thistles. It won't grow for thee. So because we're in this world, and maybe we're starving, there might be winter. Humans certainly have times of famine and winter where it would be impossible for some people to get enough food, like vegetables that were healthy to sustain your children. But Paul says that he would eat no flesh at all, ever again, if it would stumble somebody. So in other words, what's more important? Eating flesh or not eating flesh? Not so important. What's really important is making sure that our mind and our conscience are strengthened so that we don't do sin. And what is sin? It has nothing to do with eating or drinking or doing this or that. But sin is stumbling a brother on the path of life. We need to nurture them and teach them how to love. Now, we can love and eat meat. Paul says we can, as long as we have wisdom and knowledge and faith. We understand. But what if somebody doesn't understand and they think killing animals is just killing animals, and you're murdering animals, and it makes them think, well, then I should go murder people. You see, we have to be careful how we teach, and this means that there is a subtle knowledge here that animals can't grasp, so they just eat each other. They don't think about right or wrong. But humans are trying to understand what is right and what is wrong. And it has nothing to do with killing an animal or a fly that's going to come back and incarnate again real quickly, and that's the purpose for them. We understand that. We have knowledge. So it's not that we shouldn't eat meat. It's that we need to live in a world where it's good and loving, and we don't like slaughtering the animals. They cry. And we instinctively realize that there's got to be a better world that's not cursed with thorns and thistles. That we don't have to somehow overcome this knowledge of sin and figure out what to do in a bad situation. That guy's murdering us. What do? Well, we don't want to murder, but we got to get rid of him so he don't murder us. This is the higher logic of a human in a world that's evil. We have to make concessions. We don't know what to do. But with wisdom and with faith, the Lord never leaves us. That love that's within us, as long as it doesn't leave us, that's the Spirit of the Lord. But we get our conscience weak. In other words, we don't care about life or death. We don't care about the animals. Yeah, we can look at the animals and see that they're murdering each other. So we can say, we don't care about them because they're murderers. No, we still see within the animal the Spirit of the Lord. We still see the innocence and the loving little kitten. We don't accuse the animal or hold it against the animal that they have this carnal nature and they're killing one another. We understand with a purpose that they're here for a short time and that what they're trying to learn in this life might not be love. That's for us to learn as humans. As little kittens, they're here to just experience life and adventure and to be here for a very short time and kill all the mice. And once they do their little job and move up the ladder, they become higher forms of life and they learn and they start learning higher forms of existence like love. But it's not their time for that. So we have to excuse them. And same can be said for our brother when we see bad people that we don't like, gluttons and murderers. We don't like what they do. And we have to prevent them from doing it because we can't let them do it to our children. But we still have to have some understanding. If you're truly a wise individual, you'll understand that every soul in the universe is only doing the best they can. We don't judge one another. The Lord does all that. All we're here to do is to learn the difference between right and wrong, and it's a subtle difference. It isn't the act of doing something that apparently looks bad. It's the act of doing something from a wicked heart without love. So you can murder somebody with love simply because it's a little bit like you murder a tick or a cougar's trying to kill your family and you have to kill the cougar. You did it out of love to save your family. So it's about love. It's not about eating or drinking. There are times when we have to defend ourselves. But we still feel sad for the animal that we had to murder. And we don't put them down in a cruel way. Even terrible, crazy rabid animals that are murdering, that are running around the neighborhood and, trying to bite people. We lovingly put them down so they don't spread their disease or harm one of our children. So we're humans. We've got to be able to think a little differently. We have to understand the situation that we're in. So let's go to the next chapter where Paul talks about meat. So let's look at Romans 14, verse 1. Do not judge your brother. Him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. Okay, here's that word weak again. Weak in faith, not in body. For one believeth that he may eat all things. Another one, who is weak, eateth only herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for deity hath received him. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Ye shall be holden up, for deity is able to make him stand. Now, what is Paul really saying here? You see, Some people can believe that it's okay to eat meat, and some people believe that it's not. And that's all that matters is what you believe. Well, then, what if I believe it's okay to mass murder the world? What if I'm Hitler? It's whatever I believe, right? He believed he was doing a good thing. What is he talking about here? Obviously, he's not talking about doing something bad, because something that's evil, nobody should do it. It don't matter what you believe about it. Murdering somebody is wrong. It don't matter who you are or what you believe. But what he's saying here is that it's not wrong to eat meat if you understand what you're doing. In times of starvation, in situations where you're in the winter and you have no garden, your children need to eat and survive. Why? Because this is the world we're in. We're supposed to learn through this classroom, and it's just about how you deal with that situation. You don't say, oh, well, this is a world of evil, I'm just going to go out and be evil. No, you say, this is a world of evil, and we can see that it was created as a classroom. So I'm supposed to say, all right, if I can take the resources of this world and tame it, because I'm the human, and I can take the animals and make a garden and start feeding my cats, and I could say, okay, this isn't the permanent world where I'm going to live forever in peace and the lamb will lie down with the wolf. This is a temporary world where the lamb and the lion's got to be incarnated over and over again. They've got to die in order to come back and keep learning lessons. And because I'm wise, I understand it. And with knowledge and with faith, I'm not just some ignorant person who doesn't know what's going on and just like an animal, just lost in my own fleshly lust. You see, there's a difference. So, verse 5, he says, one man esteemeth one day above another. Oh, so now he's not talking about just meat. And the same principle can be applied here with the Sabbath. One day. What day? One man esteemeth one day above another, another esteemeth every day alike. So, it can be applied even to other things, not just to eating meat. We're not talking about whether it's right to eat meat or not eat meat, celebrate the Sabbath or not to celebrate the Sabbath. Obviously, it has nothing to do with what we do or don't do. The criteria for what is right and what is wrong is what is loving, what is good. If you are in a world where animals are dying and this world creates evil animals that are trying to kill you, and you have a choice either to kill them and become like an animal without understanding, or become a human and realize that with love, you still love the animals and you know that they're at that level, but that your level is to understand that in a perfect world, we wouldn't murder, but ignorant children do things they shouldn't do. Little animals eat each other. But as humans, we try not to. We try to tame the world, make a garden, and get rid of the curse, which is the law. It's going to take a lot of work to get rid of the idea of vengeance and hate and not judging. But we got to get to a place where we understand that everybody's on their own level. And so for some people that are at this level where they're being trained because they can't do it on their own, the Spirit doesn't speak to them. They got to go by law. It makes sense to them that they should keep a Sabbath and everybody should gather on a certain day. This helps us to remember what day we're supposed to worship. But for others, we don't need a certain day. We worship every day. It depends on the level that you're at. The old law covenant was for those who were sinners, but there's no law made for righteous people, because righteous people are a law unto themselves. They know and they follow the Spirit. So he's not saying that it's right to eat meat or wrong to eat meat. And he's not saying it's right to keep the Sabbath or wrong to keep the Sabbath. What he is saying is that Christianity doesn't get salvation from doing any of those things. And that if you have wisdom and knowledge and faith, you know that the point is to learn how to love. And in every circumstance, for instance, if a lamb falls into a ditch on the Sabbath and you keep Sabbath and that's important for you, and it's wrong to work on the Sabbath, then what do? Well, you better keep the law. If that's the only thing that's going to give you salvation is law, then you let that lamb die. But Jesus said, no, what's important is love. You get the lamb out of the ditch, even if you think it's important to keep the Sabbath. More important to save the lamb. Well, wait a minute. That little lamb might eat bugs. He's a murderer. He goes out and eats leaves and little bugs, and right? Cows can eat bugs. Deer. Certainly cats and lots of animals eat other animals. So are they not good? No. This is their nature. That's their place in the classroom. Now, a human being that was all the way to the end of the classroom and had all wisdom and knowledge would do their best to not eat animals simply because they understand there's no reason to eat animals. That secrets, that hidden in this world is a perfect paradise where even the animals wouldn't have to eat animals. But that the missing link between this world and that world, the paradise, is humans getting their crowns and their white robes and being able to bring the world into subjection and having dominion over the fish of the sea and the animals. We don't yet have dominion over all the world. What we've done is we've let our carnal nature, the beast, has the dominion. So ultimately, the lamb will lie down with the wolf. That is the proper way to live. But in a world where you're dying and you're in the Antarctic and you're freezing and you're going to die and you can't get back to your family unless you eat that penguin and find a way to make fire and murder some trees and burn them, well, you're going to have to live in this world, but with faith and knowing that it's a classroom and the penguin's just going to be incarnated back into the world because you have greater knowledge. You understand that it's not a sin. So, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day regardeth it unto the Lord, and he that regardeth not the day to the Lord he doth not regard it. He that eateth, eateth to the Lord, for he giveth God thanks, and he that eateth not to the Lord he eateth not, and he giveth deity thanks. For none of us live unto himself, and no man dieth to himself. For whether we live unto the Lord, and whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. Well, is he talking about every human being? No, not everybody lives for the Lord. Right? But for those who are living for the Lord, we're doing the best. Whether we die or whether we live, we do it unto the Lord. For to this end Christ both died and rose and revived, that he might be Lord both of the dead and living. Oh, Jesus is the Lord of the dead and the living. Hey, you Jehovah's Witnesses, what does that mean to you? So Jesus isn't just some guy, I guess. Verse 10, but why dost thou judge thy brother? Jehovah's Witnesses, why do you judge your brother? Modern Catholics and excommunications and Mormons and all, why are you judging your brother? Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue will confess to deity. So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to deity. Let us not therefore judge one another any more, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. See, it's all about love. It's not about what you do or you don't do. It's why you do it. I know, and I am persuaded by the Lord Jesus, that there is nothing unclean of itself. But to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. If thy brother be grieved with thy meat, Now walkest thou not charitably, destroy not him with thy meat, for whom Christ died. So Paul's saying, I wouldn't eat meat ever again if it bothers people. Other people see me doing it, I wouldn't do it. In other words, if I see myself doing it, and I'm not aware that I'm doing it out of necessity, but I'm just doing it for indulgence, then it's a sin for me. If you're eating meat just because you enjoy it, and you're hunting because you enjoy killing animals, that's a sin. You understand that there are hunters that do it for sport? And that's a sin. You Christians that are hunters for sport, you're sinners. Doesn't mean you're evil. It means you've broken the law of love. You're not doing things correctly. Your heart isn't right. Don't murder animals for no reason. Because the kingdom of deity is not meat or drink, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. For he that in these things serveth Christ is acceptable to deity and approveth of men. Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things whereof may edify one another. For meat destroy not the work of deity. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. If you're eating meat because you just love the taste of meat, and there's blood running down your face and you're a glutton, that's a sin. If you have to eat meat because there's no other food to keep you healthy, you have no diet that can keep your body alive, because all you got is a bunch of, terrible hybrid produce at the store, and you're living in the city and you don't have a farm, well, if you have knowledge, you may have to, in certain times, in famine or in starvation or in certain situations, you're going to have to eat meat in order to be healthy. Now, let me show you this from another prophet in the modern times. This is section 89 of the Doctrines and Covenants. This was given by Joseph Smith at Kirtland, Ohio, February 27th, 1833. And it's very interesting. And we have then not just the apostles in the past, but modern prophets that have taught us something here. It's a word of wisdom for the benefit of the council of the high priests assembled in Kirtland and the church, and also the saints in Zion. Well, I consider myself a saint in Zion. To be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and the will of deity in the temporal salvation of all the saints in the last days. 3, given for a principle with promise, adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints who are or who could be called saints. Behold, verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarned you by giving unto you this word of wisdom by revelation, that inasmuch as a man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good, neither meet in the sight of your Father, only in assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. And behold, this should be wine, ye pure wine of the grape of the vine of your own make. Now, isn't that interesting? It's a little bit like Paul. You got to really read this kind of in between the lines, because he starts off by saying that wine and strong drink is not for humans. Strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. That's what it's really primarily for. Alcohol is to wash things off your skin or to disinfect a wound. But notice he just uses the word strong drink there. He doesn't say wine is for washing your body. That's not what wine is for, right? Strong drink, obviously he means like 80 proof alcohol, whiskey. It's not good to drink a whole lot of that. Now, it could be used for medicine too, and it has been, but it's not something we are designed to live on or drink for recreation. We should not partake of whiskey and strong drink. Alcohol is for disinfecting wounds and washing the skin. Right? But then he says, but for your sacraments, you should do it. But only pure wine that you make yourself. Now, is that a rule? You could never drink wine from the bottle at the store? Probably not, but he's giving you a recommendation. He's telling you it's better for you to make your own wine. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with it if you're making it. Oh, but you're only making it for the sacrament, right? Well, hold on. What is the sacrament? According to the New Testament, the apostles were having this sacrament not just on Saturdays or Sundays, but they would break bread from house to house. And they ate their food with singleness of heart. And I believe they broke bread with one another every day, including other festivals, love festivals that they would have on Easter and celebrations like the wedding celebrations and birthday celebrations. So they had many celebrations where they drank the wine and the bread. So perhaps what he's saying is it's a little bit like, other herbs that we've talked about. If you're a pothead and you're just lying around smoking pot, first of all, I wouldn't smoke anything. It's not good for you. But if you're partaking of herbs every day and you got no time for work or doing anything productive, you're just lying around out of your mind, that's like gluttony. Food's okay, but don't eat too much. And so I believe wine is for when people get together for their sacraments. You might use the word party, a festival, a celebration. And we can have celebrations every day, but we shouldn't drink wine with our ordinary meals. We shouldn't just sit around drinking wine. You see people that you walk up on the property and you go up on the porch and there they are just sitting there with a case of beer, and they're just drinking beer for no reason all day long. Okay, that's wrong. It's fattening. It's not good for you. It's not good for you. It's gluttony. So we shouldn't drink strong drink and wine a lot. But he says we should make wine ourselves for certain festival occasions. That's what he's saying. So then he gets in verse 8, he's talking about tobacco. He says again, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and it's not good for the man. Now, in this case, he says it's not good for you. He literally tells you tobacco is not good for the belly or for the man, but it's an herb for bruises and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. Don't use tobacco internally at all. I guarantee it. It constricts the blood vessels in your body. It'll cause a lot of inflammation, and your back and arthritis will start up. You'll feel bad. It's not good for your veins, your heart. It causes high blood pressure. There's a lot of problems with nicotine. Don't do it at all. And then he's talking about in verse 9, hot drinks. Now, modern Mormons believe that means you're not allowed to drink coffee or tea, because aren't they hot? So instead of using their noggin and realizing that he's talking about the temperature of a drink. I mean, if you're not allowed to drink tea, then what about sun tea? It's cold. You might even put ice in it, but it's still tea. In fact, that's what herbs are. Herbs are put in water and they're infused into the juice, and you drink tea. Tea is healthy for you, and coffee is tea. It's just an herb that you soak in water. You can make it cold or you make it hot. But when you drink it, don't drink it hot, because that really boiling water down your throat's not good for you. So if you're going to make tea or coffee, cool it down. That's all he's saying. And if he meant warm is not okay either, he would have said hot or warm. But he literally meant hot, because warm, like, how about when you eat soup? Should you cool it down before you put it in your mouth? Probably. Because if he wasn't just saying that, then he would be against all the herbs or stew, right? Why not say you shouldn't eat stew because it's hot? You know, that's something that that Joseph Smith himself ate. Mormons eat it. Big hot bowl of beans or a hot bowl of stew. Lasagna is pretty hot. But he's just saying, don't boil your tea piping hot, pour it in a cup and drink it. That's not good for you. Cool it down. If he wasn't saying that, then he'd be against tea. See, this is the same with the Bible. We have to be careful when we interpret what somebody says or what they write. If we look at the word hot and think that just means anything hot, that we shouldn't partake of it, then we wouldn't be eating stew. So it's not about that. And if he meant don't drink coffee and tea, he would have just said don't drink coffee and tea. He doesn't mention coffee and he doesn't mention tea. He's talking about hot, piping hot things. He's not talking about tea, or he would have said don't drink tea. Don't drink coffee. He didn't say don't drink coffee. In fact, it's been shown that you can look back in history and Joseph Smith actually drank coffee. He actually drank tea. In fact, notice what Joseph Smith said. It was reported to me that some of the brethren had been drinking whiskey that day in violation of the word of wisdom. Well, that's the strong drink he said not to drink. He said, I called the brethren in and investigated the case and was satisfied that no evil had been done, and gave them a couple of dollars with directions to replenish the bottle to stimulate them in the fatigues of their sleepless journey. So in this case, Joseph Smith said it was perfectly fine to even drink whiskey, strong drink, because they needed a stimulant. They were on a long journey and they were sleepless. So it was a kind of medicine. So there's never this is a rule, this is a commandment of the Lord. We have to learn to use wisdom when we do anything. So it's not absolutely forbidden to even drink whiskey if it serves some purpose. But we probably shouldn't drink it very often or very much, because it's not good for you. And Joseph Smith was not against herbs, which many herbs have to be made and partaken in the form of a soup or tea. You have to cook the herb. You can't just go out in the wild and start eating herbs and grasses without cooking them. You couldn't eat a lot of soups without cooking it. Those cats are running around here like little terrors and eating a lizard while they're doing it. So, again, verse 10, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs deity hath ordained for the consumption, nature, and use of man. So yes, he believed in eating herbs. Now, you can't just go out and start eating grass from the field. You know, a lot of these things, like even potatoes, have got to be cooked. You go out and you get acorns, you collect them, you've got to process them, soak them in water, blanch them. There's too much tannins in there. In this world we live in, it's a bad world. It's not the paradise that Daddy gave us. We have to process a lot of these foods. And herbs, you make tea with them. That's what you do. And coffee is also an herb. But don't drink it in excess. every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof. All these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Well, how many modern Mormons who follow this, supposedly, eat their food in season? And is it mandatory? Well, what if you can't get it in season? What if you don't have a garden? What if you're going to the store and you're getting bananas in the winter? Well, because you're getting them from Bolivia or somewhere. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but yes, this is what would make people healthy, to eat foods that grow in the season. So berries and things that are sweet, we only eat them in the summer because they're not going to be a lot of, well, we might dry some of the fruit out and eat them throughout the winter as well. Yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. What? He says, flesh of animals, beasts, and fowls of the air, I have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. You see, we're living in a world where there are famines, there are starvations, we're living in a world that's cursed. It doesn't produce food because it's got thorns and thistles. It's not producing food. And therefore, as a human being, he gave us the law of Moses as a tutor that led to Christ. And somehow or another, we've got to figure this out. The Apostle Paul tried to help us understand. And now Joseph Smith is trying to share the truth about something here. That we are allowed to eat meat. We cannot judge our brother if they do. But those who are at a place in their life where they don't want to eat meat because they don't need to. They have so much knowledge, and they're so blessed that they've got a ranch and they've got chickens and they can eat the eggs and they can get the milk and they have a garden and they can eat a variety of plants. And they're healthy eating the herbs. They've gotten rid of the curse in their little yard and they're preparing for when the world becomes a paradise again. They can eat just vegetables for a long period of time and stay healthy because they have a variety. But there are people living in the city that can't or don't have access to healthy vegetables. It might be that for their health, they need to eat meat. You could be very healthy eating meat. And there are a lot of problems with eating meat as well, and we're not going to get into that as far as the way they treat the animals and all of that. This is a big subject, but we're discussing one aspect of it here today. It's not forbidden. Human beings may morally eat meat with wisdom. It was ordained for our use sparingly. Not gluttonously, but sparingly. Notice the word sparingly. He says it's ordained for our use. But wait a minute. If the Lord ordained it for our use, why would it be sparingly? If he said, oh, I want you to eat meat, then he wouldn't be sparingly. So in other words, the Lord doesn't really want you to eat meat. It's not like, oh, let's all kill one another and eat the meat from the animals and this is the way the Lord made it. No. But he ordained it for us sparingly because there are going to be times when we're hungry, starvation, famine, we're going to have to eat meat. Or when we're in a city in the last days and there aren't any places right at the moment to put a garden in, we might have to consider eating meat. And then he says, and it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or famine. So he ordained the use of meat sparingly when there's a famine or in the winter or when you're cold. I don't know what that means. But there are times, and not just in the winter, Not just in the famines, but even in the times when you're just cold. And notice the wording, it is pleasing unto me that it should not be used. So in other words, he says, it pleases me if you don't use it. But if you have to, you can. I understand. But I'm very pleased if you don't. Look at the wording here. He didn't say it's pleasing to the Lord if you don't drink coffee. So get off of that. But it is pleasing unto the Lord if you don't eat meat. That's pleasing. But he does ordain it in times of famine or when you can't get the proper nutrition. You see, like modern times, living in the cities, having to deal with Kroger's or Safeway or something like this. All grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts, to be the staff of life. Oh, the staff of life to support you. Grain, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and for the fowls of the heaven and all the wild animals that run or creep upon the earth. And these hath deity made for the use of man, only in times of famine and excess of hunger? A lot of Mormons don't read that part. So he says, grains, just like meat, it's ordained for the use of man, but grains are only to be used to support you as a staff in times of famine and excess of hunger. So when you're really hungry and you don't got anything to eat, you can eat grain or meat. But he really doesn't want you to do it all the time. Grains aren't something, just look around and you look in the world and in nature, there's not a lot of grains to be had. You got to cultivate it. We're supposed to eat food that grows like fruit on the tree. You walk up and pluck it and it just grows by itself. But you got to plant and harvest grains. Not necessarily the way we're supposed to eat. And he goes on, he says, all grain is good for the food of man. All grain. Hold on, he contradicts this in a second. And this is telling. So all grain is okay or good for food, as also the fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground, like potatoes are under the ground and apples and nuts are above ground. But nevertheless, wheat for man, corn for the ox, and oats for the horse, and rye for the fowls and the swine. So wheat is the kind of grain primarily for man, and corn is for the ox, and oats is for the horse. So it's not just all grains is ordained for man, not just that simple. We can eat wheat and make bread, and we like that. But when you're really hungry, it's better to eat something else. And what would that be? Well, you go back up to 16. The grain is good for food, as also the fruit, just like the fruit. So he's really saying fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground, that's what we're supposed to eat. But grain is good for food, just like that, as long as you understand it's only in times of hunger and in famine. So you can eat it just like you can the fruit and the nuts, but only in times of excess hunger and famine. He made them for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. So grain is not something we eat all the time. If we can get a hold of just nuts and fruit and vegetables, that's what we should eat most of the time if we have it available. We shouldn't eat meat because if it's just for sport or the lust of the flesh, no. You should eat vegetables if you can. But if you cannot, you have to use wisdom. I hope you understand, guys, what the Apostle Paul and the prophet Joseph Smith is teaching us here. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there, and I've got some things to do around this place. I'm getting a lot done, so I'm really happy about that. I'll get some pictures here soon. But It's really been raining, and it's just so beautiful. The garden's beautiful, and the animals are happy. But I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you all. His grace and His peace will always be with you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one, guys.